Hey, my friends, it's Kelly Reeves, and welcome to the Confidence Academy. Hey, everyone, and welcome to the Confidence Academy. I'm your host, Kelly Reeves, and I am so thrilled to be here because Dr. Georgine Nanos is here to talk about everything menopause, with a particular focus on brain health and emotional regulation. Dr. Nanos is the founder and CEO of Kind Health Group in Encinitas, California. And with over 20 years of experience, Dr. Nanos holds a bachelor's degree from Colgate University, a master's degree in public health from Boston University, and a doctor of medicine degree from George Washington's University School of Medicine. Dr. Nanos is known for leading the charge for integrating mental health with primary care practices. And if you're listening, thank you for being here, because this is not just for you, though. This is for any woman or even a man who you think may need to hear this today. So please share, because what you're about to hear will change their lives and yours. So please help me welcome Dr. Georgine Nanos to the Confidence Academy. So Dr. Nanos, thank you so much for being here. I'm thrilled to talk to you about menopause, and that seems so weird to say because you're like, who wants to talk about menopause?
I want to talk about menopause. Thank you so much. This is a wonderful opportunity. It is one of my favorite topics. So,
Well, thank you. And
menopause is cool.
yeah. And if you're going through menopause, you're cool, even during the hot flashes. So
Yes, no, we're definitely the coolest for sure.
Well, yeah, your own personal summer. Who gets to have that? So I want to start out by having you speak directly to the person who's listening, who's either about to start menopause, maybe in perimenopause, in the throes of menopause, like I am, or maybe someone who is in a relationship with a woman, like a man who's in a relationship with a woman in menopause who may not understand it because could you speak to them about kind of what they're about to experience, what they're going to learn here today with you, and kind of what they're going to walk away with after this conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. So menopause is, well, let's just define what it actually is. It's the time in a woman's life after she has finished having her periods, which is usually a year. It's technically defined as a year without periods. And once you've gone a full year, you're technically in menopause. But the period before menopause and during and after can last anywhere from 5 to 10 years, even. So that's a long stretch of life.
Yes.
Typically, menopause is around the age of 51 on average in the United States, but it can start as early as 45, younger, depending on your family history. And it can last a long time. And what's happening is your body is preparing for these hormonal changes where you have a steep decline in your estrogen levels. And what estrogen does over time is it's crucial for cognitive function, for neuronal communication, oxidative stress, memory. Estrogen really is a key factor in a woman's body, and progesterone and testosterone. And when all of those things start to drop down, then there are a lot of changes that happen in a woman's body that can affect us in a myriad of ways throughout, all of our body systems, from our brain health and our cognitive function, as well as our cardiac function, as well as our skin changes, vaginal changes. I mean, everything starts to change. So it can be a very overwhelming time for women and the men who are with them sometimes.
Yeah.
And it also comes at a time in our lives where there's a lot of transition naturally. When we're in our 50s, you've got, kids that are either teenagers or starting to leave the house. So you've got the stress of teens, maybe an empty nest situation. You have aging parents. If you're a stay-at-home mom, you suddenly have that overwhelming issue of having your kids be gone and maybe looking at a new transition in your life. If you're a working mom or a working woman, then you're often at the peak of your career, and that comes with its other stresses. So it's also coupled with a kind of weird time in our lives sometimes. So all of that coming together creates a lot of things going on that we're going to talk about today, and we're going to kind of unpack them all and talk about some solutions, and just know that you're normal and it's okay.
Well, and I love that last sentence because I think and I know like when I started going through perimenopause and everything just started, and it seemed to happen so quickly. Like one minute I was 45 and normal, next minute I am like, oh,
Yeah.
and I didn't know what was happening, and maybe there was this part of like I didn't want to admit that I'm in menopause. So if women, we feel like we dismiss it, but then things, all this starts coming out and we get categorized as crazy because so much is going on. So how can you like unpack that part of menopause, like what goes on in our brains and our mental health for
Yeah.
when we hit
So
perimenopause and menopause?
right. So there is a reality of cognitive dysfunction that is associated with menopause, and we're certainly not crazy. Um, and just getting back to talking about menopause, like we need to really normalize talking about it, and just
Yes.
the way we talk about anything else in medicine and anything else that's going on. This is such a natural part of our lives, and it's really something to be celebrated. So I'm like over people like whispering about menopause. I talk about it all the time. I have
Yeah.
teenage boys. I talk about it constantly to everyone. They're horrified, but I'm like, I don't care. He's like, my kids are like, why are you so weird? I'm like,
Right.
sorry, it's the
Sorry, it's menopause.
menopause.
Yeah.
Shut up. So anyway, getting back to the reality of the cognitive dysfunction. So um what's happening is we're talking about like minor memory lapses, trouble focusing, some slower mental processing, sort of reduced executive function, and about 60 to 70% of perimenopausal and menopausal women report these significant changes. And it isn't just simply aging, it's really like it's a temporary phase that's really strongly linked to these hormonal changes. And a lot of high functioning, we're all high functioning women.
Hmm.
I feel like if you're a woman, you're like crushing it in this life. And
Yeah.
so often like we all like just quietly endure this, and it affects our emotional health and our personal
Hmm.
relationships and our professional relationships. And it's a real issue. And so we talk about brain fog, perimenopausal and menopausal brain fog, and that could look like difficulty finding words, losing your train of thought, like not able to being able to multitask as expertly as you normally do. And that increases anxiety and embarrassment and just internal frustration. And
Yes.
it just women suffer silently until they can get diagnosis and validation, and it's often lost on the general medical profession. So
Yeah, and I think like I'm guilty. Like I walk into the kitchen, like, why did I walk in here? So it's like I'll
yeah.
have a menopause moment. And so, why do you think women tend to wait for that diagnosis and validation?
Because we always put ourselves last. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's the nature of how we're wired, and how society, kind of puts everything, everyone else comes before us, our kids, our husbands, our work, everything. And so eh, that's sort of the way women are conditioned, unfortunately. And our emotional health, I mean, we will go to the doctor maybe if there's like a major physical issue, but there's a tendency to put our emotional issues and our emotional needs at the very, very bottom. And that's definitely part of that, and that really has to change. I do think that since COVID, I think the one silver lining of COVID is that mental health is really coming up into the forefront much more than it used to be. So that's definitely a very good thing. But it is this tendency to just underplay everything, and we're also expected to just deal and just
Mm-hmm.
put your head down,
Suck
get
it
through
up.
it,
Yeah.
suck it up. Like, I mean, I gotta say, if some of these things happened to men, they would lose their minds.
Right.
So
They can't even deal with getting a cold. Yeah.
no, no. I mean, in my profession, we call it a man cold.
Right.
That means that like you have like a slight sniffle, and the person thinks they're on death's door. So
Yeah.
like, yeah, we see you.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it's absolutely it's just the way our society has kind of put ourselves last. So that's part of the delay, and also not knowing that there are solutions. So that's the
Yeah.
other thing too. Just a huge, like you said, everything's shrouded in mystery around menopause, and we don't talk about it enough, and so people don't know that there's like real solutions out there for them.
Yeah. Well, and and going back to mental health, there's always been such a stigma about it. And like you can't even say like when I went through and I still have a regular therapist because I co-founded a nonprofit animal rescue, and there was a lot of trauma I dealt with seeing animal abuse every day. So I started working with therapists. And there was also some residual anxiety or whatever. But I've been open about it, and people have said, "Well, you talk about your anxiety like it's normal." I'm like, it is.
100% it is. I mean, everybody should have a therapist. Everyone should
Yeah.
have the benefit of having a third party to talk to. And, we are all going through stuff. That is part of the human condition. As
Yes.
the family physician, I can tell you, family doctors and primary care is really where 80% of mental health care is accessed in this country. Very few people ever make it into a psychiatrist's office. So we see mental health more than any other aspect of any other specialty in the medical profession. And I will tell you, everybody has something. Not 90%, not 95, 100%. Everyone's got something going on. If they don't have it today, they may have had it yesterday. They might have it tomorrow. That's part of life. Like there are so many things that that we go through that can turn our lives upside down, and it's normal, and it just breaks my heart when people don't seek help for these things that are part of the human condition. We all will experience some depression, some anxiety, some
Mhm.
trauma, and that's it happens to everyone. And if you don't think it does, then you're kidding yourself.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's also the stigma, and we don't want to, especially in professional environments. It's like, well, and women, because, and yeah, I've founded 5 companies, and most of my work has been in male dominated industries. And so it's like you have to be strong, but you can't be bitchy. You have to like, so you have to kind of hold it together with this delicate balance of, and especially now you're in your 50s, 60s, and beyond, and not only are you dealing with ageism, but gendered ageism. Throw menopause into the mix, and it could become a recipe for disaster potentially if you don't have the right resources and support.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I certainly experienced that myself, being in certainly a male dominated profession as medicine. I see
Mhm.
that all the time. Um, but, I just, as we were saying earlier, I think we're in this stage of our career where I just don't give a
Bleep, yeah.
bleep.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so yeah, but that is certainly true. And again, I think it's about educating women and men about what's really happening, and being open-minded, and being accepting, and understand, having kindness and compassion to what
Mhm.
people are going through. Everyone's going through something. And it's just about having that compassion for our fellow human beings,
Mhm.
and knowing that there are options out there that we'll certainly get to later, and ways to help all of these things that are happening to us.
Yeah. So speaking of the men that may be listening, how can, because so I've had friends that were like, "Oh, I divorced my wife because she went crazy in menopause," and I'm like, "Wait, okay." So so clearly there was a deep lack of understanding. But how can men, both in our personal lives and in professional lives, like how can they be more understanding and supportive to women going through either perimenopause or in the middle of menopause?
I don't know that they have a perfect solution for that. I don't know that we can solve that one
Yeah.
in the time that we have.
Yeah.
Maybe we're
A whole
going for
other
like
episode.
10 more episodes,
Yeah.
but I do think, again, it's about like recognizing that men and women are entirely different.
Mhm.
And you know a woman's body is just wired completely differently. And as I was saying earlier, we have so many things going on in our bodies, First of all of that allows us to like produce life. Let's like think about that for a
Yeah.
second. Like that
Hello.
is incredible. And in order to do that, there's so many hormonal, interplays going on in our bodies. And that over time, when we go through that reproductive part of our lives, all of that, our bodies during their reproductive years are like filled with all of these hormones that support reproduction, which is an incredible, gift. And so when that starts to go away, there are so many changes. I mean, think about that. We're in that menopause, that reproductive period of our lives for 40 years. So usually most women start their periods around 12-ish and 40 years. So 40 years,
Yeah.
you've got this like these hormones, and then all of a sudden they like are virtually gone overnight and you're like, what the hell?
Yeah.
So that's a huge transition, and I think just wrapping your brain around that is the first step to realizing that, like, if you've got something working in your body for 40 years and then it stops or starts to decline really quickly, it's going to have an impact. And so again, having some compassion and some patience around that. um, Women don't go crazy during menopause. I think it's the lack of understanding that exacerbates some of those tensions. Um, it's certainly a temporary thing too. And again, there are ways to help with all of that.
Yeah. And I think it's education and awareness. Like if, and not that I want to play couples therapist, but it's like, okay, if you're going through this, especially if you've been married, say you got married in your 20s, and then now you have, adult kids and a wife in menopause, and everything is shifting in life. And like you said earlier, women, we kind of bear the brunt of it mainly on an emotional level. So the kids leaving and aging parents, and now there's menopause thrown into the mix. So it's really a biological thing. It's a medical thing. It's not something that like, oh, I'm just going to decide to have menopause and be temperamental. But
Right. Right. I mean, every woman on the planet is going through this, so or will eventually go through it. So yes, it's absolutely, a well documented medical, issue.
yeah. So how can women, because we go through this and suddenly our bodies are changed. Like I now have cellulite and fat where I never had it before. I have wrinkles my skin isn't the skin I used to have. My butt isn't the butt I used to have. My belly. So how do we reclaim one clarity because of the brain fog and what we go through mentally, but also our confidence physically, like when you're like, oh God, I don't want to be seen in a two-piece anymore, kind of
Right.
thing. So how do kind of we reclaim that clarity and that confidence, both mentally and physically?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing that we can talk about are just some basic lifestyle solutions. So sleep is a really, really big one. And getting enough sleep is really the cornerstone of everything. And so, getting a consistent sleep routine, reducing your screen exposure, and then diet is another really important piece of it. Really avoiding pro-inflammatory foods and focusing more on brain boosting nutrition like omega-3s, antioxidants, like a lower sugar diet. Exercise is also really critical at this age. Really, like, exercise is incredibly important, especially as we age, all of these things. But in order to maintain everything, you get to this like move it or lose it stage in our lives when we're in our 50s, where you kind of take this path and you really have to choose your path and exercise regularly in order to maintain everything, maintain muscle mass, and stay well into your 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And so exercise is a key component of that. And it tends to be a time where a lot of people slow down their exercise, but you got to like double down on that. So I'm big into that. It just
Mhm.
stimulates neurogenesis and cognitive resilience,
Right.
and in addition to all the obvious cardiovascular benefits, and mental health benefits. And then, stress management as well, like mindfulness, meditation, yoga, all that stuff is great. So those are really like the key lifestyle pieces that are really important to really, really focus on.
So, and then what about like confidence? Like, so that's like, because there's a mindset too that kind of gets you knocked off. Like, and then you see, oh, like where I used to live down in Newport Beach, and you see these guys, like I wasn't dateable because I was too old. Guys my age were going for the 30-year-olds. So, and that's probably like a lifestyle and culture of that area, but still it could be a confidence knock to somebody who is like, wow, now men don't even want me, or I'm not dateable, or something that can start to get in our heads.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I'm in Southern California as well, in San Diego, and that's definitely a thing.
Yeah.
I do think, it is. Um, I think for women, we really have to realize that this is a time in our life where we have to step into our own power. We're really at a point where we we know so much. We have lived, we're a product of our lived experience. That's just really incredible. Like being a woman, it's just amazing. And
Mhm.
I think we have to really lean into that and just realize that, like, it like I was saying earlier, I'm in that I don't give a bleep
Right.
about I'm in that I don't give a bleep phase of my life,
Right.
because I am who I am, and you really, it's about like claiming who you are and like loving yourself and realizing like we all do the best we can. No one's perfect. We're never going to be perfect. You're never going to, you may never get that 20-year-old body back
Yeah.
again, but whatever. We have this 50-year-old brain, which is such a gift.
Right.
And that's, I think, the part that we really need to look at. And I mean, it's hard. It's definitely hard with social media, just
Mhm.
in our faces all the time. Everyone's
Yep.
airbrushed to perfection, and that certainly
Filtered
makes
and
it, yeah, and filtered, and that definitely makes it more difficult. But I look at these young girls on Instagram, like, girl, you don't know anything.
I know.
And so
I do the same thing. I'm like, oh,
so
just give
it's a
yourself 30
trade-off.
years, honey.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm like, I looked like that too when I was 20.
Right.
So it's like we were saying earlier, if we could have that 20-year-old body with what we know now, oh
Yeah.
my God, you'd
Yeah.
you'd crush life.
Right.
But that's just not how it is. And
Right.
so it's just about really kind of embracing who you are, and that everything, everything that's happened into your life up until this moment defines who you are, and the bad too, the good and the bad. And so I've been through a really horrible divorce, crazy stuff in my life, and everyone's like, oh, would you have done it differently? And no,
Yeah.
actually I wouldn't, because defined who I am now. And it's part of my journey,
Hmm.
and sometimes the journey sucks, but um, we have to kind of navigate it, and like I said, sort of step into your confidence and really just love who you are, because you're all you got.
Yeah, that's true. And when I turned 50, I actually celebrated it because I felt like I was such a grown up now. Like, like I'm finally an adult. I'm 50.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's what is like a modern menopause toolkit, like some things that people can kind of have in their purse, or just in their mind, or in their medicine cabinet, or just things that they can do. And you mentioned earlier, hormone support and
Yeah.
exercise, diet, but kind of maybe a little more specific of things they could have in the toolkit. And I know, and I would like you to talk about the TMS and exomind
Yes.
approach, because that's something new
Yes.
and pretty groundbreaking. So let's talk about that because I think that could probably be in this toolkit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'll touch briefly on hormone therapy. So, um, doing some sort of customized hormone therapy, hormone replacement therapy is important for some women. And again, this is something, a conversation to have with your doctor or your your primary provider. Sorry. Um, what happens is, a lot of those, as we said, those hormones go into steep decline. And for many, many years, I mean, at least when I first started medical school, the trend was away from hormones. And there was a big study about 20 years ago that was showing, hormones are bad for women. Everyone has to come off of them. And now, 20 years later, we're finding that, well, maybe not so much. And so the tide has really turned. And it really is an individual conversation that you need to have with your doctor to look at your risks. A lot of if you have a personal history of certain kinds of cancers, it's probably not the best course. But for a lot of women, it is something that is really life-saving, hormone replacement therapy.
Mhm.
And the key is to be on the lowest dose possible to treat your symptoms for the shortest amount of time. And again, like there's so many combinations, and it's about finding the right solution in a conversation with your doctor. So that being said, that's one approach. And then as far as the cognitive issues that arise from menopause, the one that you were just referencing is TMS, which stands for transcranial magnetic stimulation. And the second I say that, I always say it's not shock therapy because it
Yeah.
sounds like, oh my God, you're like
Yeah, it could
doing
be
something to my brain.
electrodes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's definitely nothing at all like that. It actually uses magnetic field energy
Oh,
to
interesting.
penetrate. Yeah, you penetrate these deep areas of the brain where our anxiety and depression centers lie. And so, what happens to all of us as humans, anytime we've had any negative event in our lives from early childhood to now, you start to develop, whether it's like a trauma, a stress, a challenge, really anything, it's just relative to your own experience. You start to form these negative loops in your brain
Mhm.
and you can get stuck in them. And that becomes what we know as anxiety, depression,
Mhm.
brain fog, all that stuff kind of gets clouded and gets knotted up in this brain in our, it's called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. It's where our emotional regulation center is. And so it gets knotted up almost like a traffic jam, you can think of it. And what TMS is doing, it's delivering these super safe but very strong magnetic pulses into that area of the brain. And it's actually creating brand new positive neuronal connections in that area of the brain. Almost you can think of it as like new lanes of highway around that traffic jam. So that
Okay.
after you have a TMS treatment, a series of TMS treatments, then when you are faced with any challenges, you can better navigate around that traffic jam and access those positive pathways of your brain. And it gives you emotional, like I said, emotional regulation, as well as better control over your thoughts and your, behaviors. And it gives you resilience, so you can cope.
Mhm.
So what it's really doing, it's not pushing happiness into your brain. It's giving you the ability to cope with life stressors because we can't take away all the crap that happens to us.
Yeah.
It's
I
never going to
wish.
stop. It's
Yeah.
nonstop. It's
Yeah.
never going to stop. But what this does is gives you the ability to handle it. And so I always say life is like 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. And so this just helps you regulate that 90% so that you can deal with life. And that's really the gift of TMS. The amazing thing about TMS is um, it's been around for 40 years. It's by no means experimental. It's
Right.
FDA approved. It's been FDA approved for almost 20 years. There's like 17,000 studies behind it. It is the most effective treatment we have in medicine today for virtually every mental health disorder, big and small. And it is safer than over the counter pain relievers. It's got the most incredible safety profile. There's no long-term side effects, which is something I can't ever say about anything else in medicine. So to have
Yeah.
something so safe and so effective to treat, you know, probably the biggest problem we face as in the human
Yeah.
race is quite a paradigm shift. It's quite incredible, and so it really gives us it's a huge, very powerful tool in our mental health toolkit, and it hasn't been it's kind of been in the shadows for a long time, but starting to emerge as a much more popular treatment and is more accessible to more people now.
Well, I love that, and I'm definitely going to check it out because one thing um, I always look at is the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system, and I started getting more into that because I founded a women's self defense company, and
Oh, cool.
yeah, so there's always the fight, flight, or freeze, and when I would talk about that in self defense, like okay, you're there's a threat, physical threat, and so your brain immediately goes into, and we talk about like the Cooper color codes of situational awareness and what you do, but when the threat's over, then you're in that rest and digest state when your parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. But then as I kept realizing, I was like, okay, there's micro threats around us every single day, or perceived micro threats, that things said on Facebook, that bill that you can't pay, that conversation you don't want to have. So, but those I would think start to build up after time. And maybe this is where TMS can come to play, because when you start to store all this trauma and stress and anxiety in your body, it builds up like a big clump. And then, like you said, it's like a traffic jam that you just have to get rid of.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there are, I mean, and I feel now more than ever, we didn't talk about this, like just the climate of our world is
Mhm.
also a big
Yeah.
stressor. And it's really affecting a lot of women quite significantly. So there's that whole aspect too.
Yeah.
That's also been an issue. But yes, so TMS is it's usually delivered over a series of treatments, and there's many different approaches to getting people the help that they need, and it really has a lasting impact. And it really, I mean, I can tell you a couple of patient stories. I'll tell you about my own personal experience. I've had some mild to moderate to sometimes very severe anxiety just by virtue of being a woman and a human and a doctor and a mom and all these
Mhm.
things, and being in
And
menopause
eating alive. Yeah.
and being alive, exactly. So and it's affected my sleep quite significantly. So we've had TMS in my clinic for almost over 4 years now. And so when I first tried it, when we brought it into our clinic, and it just for me gave me this incredible sense of calm and peace. And if you know me, I could never describe myself as peaceful. And so,
Likewise.
so, but I just felt so centered, and I just was sleeping so well. And it just really like helped me, like I was saying, like all the stuff just keeps coming at you, but you handle it much better. And so, we also use it a lot for postpartum anxiety and postpartum
Mhm.
depression, but quite a bit in perimenopause as well. We had a patient, Lindy, who was just in here a few months ago. She was right in the throes of menopause. She's 51. She was going through a major midlife career shift. Her kids were just getting out of the house. Her relationship was, she was having maybe some relationship issues as well, just around all of her anxiety, and just because she was completely overwhelmed and really at her
Yeah.
wits' end. And we, we treated her with TMS, and she really very quickly, within a couple of weeks, felt like all of that lifted, and it started that knot started to sort of untangle itself. And she just, again, as I was describing, just felt like she felt calm and in control, and that she had like agency and the ability to like manage her, executive function and her emotional health finally, which was amazing to see. And we have hundreds and hundreds of stories like this in our TMS clinic that are just they're just very inspiring to me. It's really been, for me, to be part of this TMS revolution, as I call it, is the most meaningful thing I've ever done in my career. Because again, having something so safe and so effective to help so many people these super profound ways is really a gift.
I love that. Well, I live up in Central Coast in Paso Robles, so I
You should come down.
yeah. Well, I'll have to see if they have it up here, but yeah, I'm out in the middle of the country in wine country, so I broke out of the city, but so would TMS, would that replace hormone? Because like with me personally, like I had to, it was kind of like trial and error with hormone replacement therapy, and it
Yeah.
was, because at first I just was like, I'm going to white knuckle it. I'm just going to do this all naturally. And then I was just like, I'm about to throw myself off a cliff. Nope,
Yeah.
I got to call my doctor. And then she did blood work and everything, but we tried a bunch of stuff until we got the right mix. But so would TMS replace hormone replacement therapy or like complement it?
It depends. It really depends on the person. It can replace it. It can also complement it. It depends on what you're really focusing on that hormone replacement therapy for. If you're using it really exclusively for those cognitive issues, TMS may be able to replace it. But hormone replacement therapy also helps with a lot of the physical symptoms as well, the vasomotor symptoms, the hot flashes, night sweats, all that stuff, and then some skin changes. And then there's a lot of vaginal changes that we
Mhm.
haven't talked about. So vaginal dryness is a really a big issue for women in this time of their lives. And so sometimes systemic hormone replacement therapy, either like a patch or a pill or a cream, can help with that. But oftentimes women can just do just vaginal hormone replacement therapy. If their symptoms are only vaginal, that's also an option for women. There's also other non hormonal options for vaginal dryness. So when you talk about vaginal dryness, again, that's due to the decrease in estrogen that really causes a lot of changes in our vaginal tissue, making it thinner and more susceptible to inflammation and pain during intercourse. That's a big thing that we often
Mhm.
see in that time in people's lives, which creates a lot of frustration for women and for their partners. And
Mhm.
so there's a laser device called Mona Lisa Touch, which has been really helpful for a lot of women. It's a CO2 laser that helps bring back elastin and collagen and new blood supply to the vaginal tissue, and that's been a lifesaver for a lot of women. So there's so many options for really all of these issues that affect women during menopause, and it's about having that conversation and really and if you're seeing a doctor or a provider that doesn't have the answers, then you might need to just look for, the problem with the way our current medical state is like we get about 5 minutes of menopause training in medical school, if that.
Yeah.
And um and it's a shame. I'm hoping maybe it's a little bit better now, but I know that was certainly the case for me. And it's about you have to find these providers who really have gone out of their way to educate themselves and advocate for women's health on every level. And that may take some time and some searching, but yeah, and that's the unfortunate thing about our healthcare system too, is a lot of times you have people that just, the way the system is set up, you have like 5 minutes, 10 minutes for your doctor, and you're just hitting the highlights. And again, as
Right.
we were saying in the beginning, this is at the bottom of the list. And so you may have to schedule a separate appointment just talk about that.
Are you seeing more? Because like when I started going into perimenopause, I stopped seeing the OBGYN I was seeing because she still had the OB part. And I'm like, you know, I never had kids in the first place, but that ship has way sailed. So,
Yeah.
so it's not like, and I think I thought, oh, well, there's the GYN part that is one size fits all, and it's not. So when I found a gynecologist, but that just specialized in menopause, that
Yeah.
was a godsend to me because gynecology is not a one size fits all approach, especially when it's the difference between an OB who specializes in babies and birth and all that versus
Right.
menopause. It's two different places in life.
It is, and again, it totally depends on the provider, on the doctor, and what they have chosen to focus on and do further education on. So I know lots of OBGYNs that are great at dealing with menopause and all, and are menopause experts, and then lots who are not. It's kind of a crapshoot, unfortunately. But as I was saying, in family medicine and primary care, we do a lot of, I mean, we do most of what I do is women's health. And so finding, other providers like family doctors, even what was I going to say? There
Menopause.
are some yes, thank you. Um, nurse practitioners, PAs,
Hmm.
they often are better listeners than doctors sometimes, I gotta say.
Yeah.
So I have worked with tons of PAs in my career and nurse practitioners who are just amazing. And sometimes, as I said, they're much more patient and they tend to spend more time with patients. So that's one approach. And then there are lots of people who are menopause experts. But when you're looking for that menopause expert, it's really important to find someone who has the credentials that match it. There are
Right.
lots of people that hang out a shingle as menopause experts. So you do want to
Yeah.
make sure that they know what they're talking about.
Yeah. So what is the exomind approach?
So the ExoMind is a TMS device, and
Okay.
one of the reasons that you most people haven't heard about TMS is because the devices up until this point have really sucked, and they've been terrible, and they've made it really challenging for in several ways. So there hasn't been a new TMS device that has come onto the market in over a decade, which
Oh
is a
wow.
very long time to have like no novel, advancement. And the older devices were just very difficult for doctors to use in their clinics. It took a long time to train our staff, and they were very uncomfortable and painful
Mhm.
for patients. And that was the way it was for forever until this device has just come onto the market in the last 6 months, and it's changed the game entirely. And it just is it's a much simpler device for us to operate in our clinics. It makes it more accessible for more doctors to have it. It's super easy to train our staff. The treatments are way, way more comfortable than
Oh good.
any of the other devices have been in the past. And we are starting to see that even the outcomes are better than some of our older devices. So it really checks all the boxes as a big generational leap forward in technology, which I think is going to really push TMS into the forefront. So that's what ExoMind is.
Okay.
It's really kind of the leading TMS device right now that is kind of leading the charge and getting it out into the mainstream.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to ask I am like, even though I'm up here and where I am, the medical quality of medical care is pretty limited because it's pretty rural. But
Yeah,
I am blessed to have my OBGYN who she stays, I mean, like her whole office is like a technology land. She's
that's
got
awesome.
she probably has it, and I know that she really stays up on it. And I do love her PA because I can just sit and talk the shit with her, and then she's like, "Oh
Yeah,
wait, I got another
see?
patient." So, so, how can women, when you start to go, you're going through all this stuff, you're going through menopause, kids leaving, suddenly empty nesters, and one thing I've heard from my girlfriends whose kids are growing up, going to college, going out of the house, one said, I no longer feel needed because
Yeah,
I'm not mom anymore. And of course I'm like, you're always mom,
yeah.
but not in the same way she was used to when when the kids were little and she felt needed. So how can women, when they're at that phase and it's menopause and everything's changing, and you might feel that sense of I'm not needed anymore like I used to, how can they begin to like trust themselves again and empower themselves again?
First of all, being mom is the hardest, most challenging job in the world. So having been mom, and you're like you said, you're always mom, but that is a big period of transition for women that have been stay-at-home moms most of their lives. It's a sudden loss of purpose, and it's very, very dramatic, and can be really painful and just sad. And I think what's important is trying to find that purpose again, and that can be in anything that you like to do. You're going to have to find if something to fill the time that's meaningful to you. So this is a beautiful time to reflect on you and what you want and what's important to you and what you've maybe always wanted to do that you couldn't do when you were raising kids. And so you want to kind of flip it and look at it as a gift to you, and to fulfill your dreams and ambitions, whatever they are. 50 is never too late to do anything. So if you wanted to start a business, volunteer, whatever it is, you can just get a part-time job. I think it's really important for women to find something, even if it's a little tiny thing, and start small. Whatever it is, just do it a day a week, couple days a week, and find something that is going to give you purpose. Because we all need that. No
Yeah.
matter what we're doing, we need to have purpose, feel that need to get up, something that drives us to get up in the morning. And so that part's really, really important. We see that a lot in women. We see that a lot in women and men when they're retiring as well. They just kind of lose focus, and they kind of become sort of rudderless.
Yeah.
And we all need purpose. So there's finding that, and kind of taking that time to be introspective and think about finally putting yourself first and what you need and what's important to you.
Yeah. And it's embracing it as you said, look at it as a turning point as opposed to a breakdown, because
Exactly.
it's almost like, it is all about, your mindset and how you look at it. You can look at it as like a death sentence of being put out to pasture, or it's like, yay, they're gone. Now I can do all this stuff I couldn't do when I had kids. So,
Right. Right.
so yeah, it's kind of like the attitude towards it. Like, how do you look at it?
It's absolutely a mindset. It's all about cognitive reframing and how you
Mhm.
decide to look at it and change that attitude. Absolutely. And I do think eventually most women do get to that yay, yay, they're gone
Yeah.
phase. It may take the time it takes may vary, but hopefully everyone
Yeah.
gets there. And again, obviously we love our children, but
Right. Well, my friends that are now grandparents, they're like, I love being a grandparent because now I can just give the baby back or
right.
like send them home.
Exactly.
And so something, I'm like, that's something to look forward to. You can still have that child presence, but you don't, you can say, okay, son, daughter, come pick your kid up from grandma's house. So,
Right.
so so, gosh, this has been such a great conversation. And I'm like, I was taking notes as you were speaking. So, one question I have about TMS: how many, like, on average, treatments are needed?
It depends on what you're looking to treat. If it's some it depends on where you are on the spectrum of mental health issues. So for more severe anxiety and depression, and we do lots of pretty intense intake to determine what patients need. For more intense anxiety and depression, you may need anywhere from 20 to 36 treatments.
Okay.
And then for uh, more less intense issues like menopausal brain fog, it's more along the lines of maybe 6 to 10 treatments, and each treatment takes anywhere from 4 to 20 minutes, and you can get them every day, sometimes multiple times a day. Again, depends on where you're going and how they're administering those treatments. And it's usually a very customized approach depending on where you are, what you need, what you're looking for. And most people do respond quite well to it.
Okay. What about supplements? Because I take lion's mane, which I had heard, because I'm in a menopause group in Facebook, and
Yeah.
it's like a couple 100,000 women. So, like, what other supplements are out there that are like over the counter that could also help?
Yeah, I mean, for brain health, certainly, that's definitely a good one. Like I was saying earlier, supplements that help with like omega 3s and
Mhm.
antioxidants are very important. Um, I think it's about looking at the quality of supplements. The supplement industry is a gajillion-dollar
Yeah.
industry, and it's it's not that it's not regulated really at
Mhm.
all, so you do have to be cautious. One of the things I run into a lot is, and this has happened to a few of my friends, they're bombarded with these Instagram ads for supplements, and
Mhm.
inevitably at least once a year I have patients who are taking so many supplements that they end up having liver or kidney
Oh,
issues and
wow.
end up in the hospital. So
Wow.
this is very, very common. So I get not wanting, there's this backlash against big pharma right now, which I
Mhm.
totally get.
Yeah.
But the flip side is people are now taking these tons and tons of supplements that can have interactions and that are doing us a disservice. So we got to be careful and find that middle ground, and really take only what you need without going overboard and getting into trouble. So the quality of supplements is important. My favorite supplement manufacturer is a company called Pure.
Oh, that's what I use.
Um, yeah, I think they're the best.
Yeah.
And then really talking to your doctor about all the supplements you're on. I always have patients, especially when I'm first meeting them, bring in everything, and they've got these like giant shopping
A
bags.
box full.
Like they won't take their blood pressure medicine, but they're
Right.
taking like 100 supplements. I'm like,
Right.
what's happening here? So, and then you go through them one by one, and you
Right.
realize like some of these are super redundant and causing more harm than good. I do encourage you to, your doctors want to know everything that you're on. So,
Yeah.
bring that all in, because it does have an impact on our overall health, especially if you're going way overboard. You want to be super, super careful. Some of those supplements do have some significant adverse effects, so
Yeah.
so that's something to watch out for.
Yeah. And another thing I wanted to ask you, because it seems like I said, I'm in that Facebook group, and I did a post like, oh, and I see people do it all the time. Like, what do you do about hot flashes? What do you do about this? And it seems like there's all these like newfangled HRT treatments that people are throwing out there. How do women kind of navigate those waters of all of these, some seem to be popping up overnight of this therapy and that therapy. How do we kind of
Figure
manage,
out what's
yeah, figure
what.
out
Yeah.
what's right, what's healthy, and how to kind of tune out all that noise and focus on what we need.
Yeah, and that's definitely hard. Again, I think it goes back to finding a person who's really skilled in hormone health, and is an expert in this area. And like we said, not necessarily all OBGYNs, and it really does take a little bit of digging to find the right fit. But as far as HRT goes, there's really there's nothing new that really comes
Yeah.
out. It's just repackaged
Right.
differently.
Yeah.
It's kind of, honestly, that's really what's happening. It's another way to market it. But it really is essentially, there's some small variations in the dosing and the sourcing, and
Mhm.
that there's that. But the key is, this is really important, that if you're taking estrogen and you still have your uterus, you want to always make sure you're also taking progesterone.
Mhm.
This is, if you take nothing away from this is the most important thing, that you're taking estrogen and progesterone together. Because
Mhm.
if you're taking estrogen by itself, and you have a uterus and you haven't had a hysterectomy, then estrogen by itself can give you uterine cancer. So you want
Oh,
to be
wow.
super careful about that.
Right.
Um, and if someone is giving you estrogen without progesterone, and you don't have,
Run.
and run exactly. So those are the kinds of things that are really important. And then there's so many different like you said, it is sometimes a trial and error situation because you've got many different delivery systems. Patches are great for some people. Some women want to take pills instead. There's also transdermal creams, and like we said, there's vaginal creams and suppositories that also are effective. So it can be overwhelming and confusing. So finding the right provider to guide you through that is
Mhm.
again key. There's lots of online stuff now that is also a little bit hit or miss. So
Mhm.
you do want to be super careful about what's happening there. And I'm happy that it's out there because it is making treatment more accessible for women. But you also want to proceed with caution and really look at vet the credentials of who's prescribing this stuff and make sure they're asking the right questions.
Right. Well, this has been so great. I feel like I've learned a lot because, even though I have a wonderful doctor and I can ask questions all the time, but you kind of broke down some things for me personally that I hadn't really thought about. And I do want to look into TMS just because, not just from a menopausal standpoint, but like I said, I have been in, therapy for
Yeah.
trauma and anxiety, and I do EMDR therapy, but I'm also big in journaling and
Yeah.
meditating. That is a big part. I journal every day. So what are some parting words for the woman out there who's like, menopause? And what do I do?
I'll take it back to what I was saying earlier. It's a beautiful time. Embrace it. I know it can suck, but it also is, I feel like, the best time in our lives because we can really step into who we are. And um, I think it's important to take this opportunity to just embrace how awesome we are as women, to talk about it with everybody. I mean, because I think that's part of the problem too. It just lives in the shadows, and that
Mhm.
it shouldn't be. It should really be like a celebration.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, this is we're like at the most awesome, fiercest point in our lives,
Yeah.
and it's a great time to be a woman in your 50s. So talk about it with all your friends because that's also how we learn from each other. We have to support each other, and what is working for you might also work for your friend, and sharing ideas, finding
Mhm.
good doctors. That's how we make it work. So talk about it all the time, then talk about it with the men too.
Right.
I mean, it's we just got to be more open and,
Mhm.
again, kind and compassionate to each other and supportive, and uh, it's awesome, and we're all fantastic as women.
I agree. So where do people find you, and how can people find the resources they would need, other than their own doctor, but some reliable
Yeah,
resources,
absolutely.
and how
We
can
and we
people find you?
do Yeah, we do a lot of virtual care for people. So even if you're not in San Diego, we're happy to help people. My website is kindhealthgroup.com. And then also for TMS, we have a separate one called kindtms.com. And we're also on Instagram and Facebook. I think, yes, we're on Facebook. So,
Okay.
and we can link to those, I think, right in the
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll give you all that. And yeah, we're here to help and navigate you through anything that you got going on.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for being here, Dr. Nanos. Your time is so appreciated. Your insight, your intellect, your everything you do is, I hope this episode was helpful to the listeners. If you're listening, hope you got a lot out of it. And please share this with a woman who you think needs to hear this, because if you're following me, then you're probably a woman in menopause, and you probably have a lot of friends that are in menopause. So share it with them. Thank you so much for joining me. This was such a great conversation, and I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kelly. It was a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much.